Many of you here would be my grand students. So as a grand teacher, I may be allowed to say. Mohammed Farashuddin, Chair, Board of Trustees and founding DC East West University. Professor Rahman, Vice-Chancellor, East West University. Professor M.R. Sheikh Musaddiq, VC East West University, আপনার সঙ্গে আমার পরিচয় হয় নাই। Dr. Fakrul Alam, Chair, Nahreen Khan Memorial Lecture Committee, and my student, I will not say my favorite student, because teachers are not supposed to have favorites, like parents are not supposed to have favorites. But children always know which child is the favorite of their mother or their father. Air Commodore Ishfaq Ilahi Choudhury, Treasurer, East West University. Nahreen Khaner এখানে পরিবার কত আছে আপনারা যদি একটু দাঁড়ান কেউ আছে এখানে নাহরিন খান আকবর আলী খানের পরিবার থেকে কেউ আছে এনিওয়ে আপনাদেরকে স্মরণ করছি honored guests, faculty and students of East West University, my friends who have taken time off to be here today, and Mr. Jahangir Alam Khan, Chief HR and Logistics. Assalamu alaikum, Shubho Shakal, Namaskar. It is indeed a great honor to have been chosen to deliver the 7th Nahreen Khan Memorial Lecture. I knew neither Nahreen nor her father, Dr. Akbar Ali Khan, though I did read his articles and did see him on talk shows. And one of his books, at least, was published by UPL, which was also my publisher. It is always sad when a young person dies, especially someone as talented and sensitive as Nahreen. The excerpts from her writing in the introduction in the brochure, Asha kori apnara porechen, reveal her imagination as well as her sensitivity. She talks about immigrants, imagining their homeland unchanged, like the images in Keats's Grecian. She talks about the Mona Lisa and compares it to a cousin who cannot speak. I thought these glimpses were beautiful. And if you haven't read the life story of Nahreen, I think it was written by her father, it is a very beautiful and very touching story of an only child who was forced to relocate whenever her father left the country to go to study or to go on a work assignment somewhere. The sadness of this child, of the children of, we think that diplomats' children have a time of their lives. Yes, they have wonderful experiences, but sadly, they do not make friends. And this comes out so beautifully in this note written by her father. Nahreen did her undergraduate at East West University, but before she could graduate, her father was appointed to the World Bank. Nahreen enrolled at the American University in Washington, DC, and graduated from there. By coincidence, many years before Navy enrolled, I did a second MA at the American University. So I thought that at least there is that connection. When I was choosing a topic for this lecture, I thought I would take a topic which I was introduced to at the American University. I took a number of very interesting topics, but one topic, and they were not topics that in those days were taught at Dhaka University, because in Dhaka University or Rajshahi University or Chittagong University, and there were no private universities. But there was one topic on translation, a course in translation, and I took that. And I thought that I would talk about translation today. Had I known that the Vice-Chancellor knew Russian, that he was such a good translator, I might have added something here, but unfortunately it is too late. আমি জাহাঙ্গীরকে পরে ধরবো যে আমাকে কেন জানান যে ওনার ভাইস চ্যান্সেলর রাশিয়ান জানেন আর রাশিয়ান গল্প আর কবিতা পড়েছেন। My talk contains many details, but I will omit them because they are all contained in this book. Ajkal, so this is when my time starts, okay? No, I would feel pressure, but I know people fall asleep. I don't want people to fall asleep. Jahangir asked me, Fakrul asked me, slide ব্যবহার করবেন? আমি অনেক চিন্তা করলাম, অনেক ব্যবহার করেছি স্লাইড, এবার স্লাইড ব্যবহার করব না। And then afterwards I thought, কেন স্লাইড ব্যবহার করব না? কারণ human beings can only focus, I think most of us can only focus on one thing at a time. আমার যদি ওখানে স্লাইড থাকতো, আমার আপনাদের হাতে বই থাকতো, তারপরে আমার চেহারা থাকতো, you would be bewildered. তখন আমি ভাবলাম না, আমি স্লাইড ব্যবহার করব না। বই আছে, আমি অনেক কিছু বাদ দেব, আপনারা আপনাদের ইচ্ছা হলে আপনারা পড়ে পড়বে। আমি কিন্তু ইংরেজিতেই বলবো। My topic is literary translations and translators, Bangladesh and beyond. I begin with a translation by a priest, a translation of Rabindranath's third poem from his original Gitanjali. What was distant friend you brought near? The stranger you made my brother. What was strange you made familiar? For much of our reading past, translators have been anonymous. Most Bangladeshis have read French and Russian classics. আর আমি এখানে অনেকগুলো নাম দিয়েছি। Unlike the Vice-Chancellor of East West University, they have not read the Russian classics in Russian, but in English translation. How many of them looked at the name of the translator? Students at Dhaka University in the past used to read the Greek classics, and there used to be one particular prose translation that they all read, and perhaps they knew the name of the translator. But we generally do not tend to look at the names of our translators. আমি ভাইস চ্যান্সেলর সাহেবকে একটু জিজ্ঞেস করি, আপনার ট্রান্সলেটর কে ছিল? মনে আছে? না, translators are not important. You prove my point. Many Bangladeshis of a certain age will remember the Russian fairy tales that were available in East Pakistan. Bangladeshis of a certain age. Did anyone even look at the name of the translator? Not to leave the Russians at the game, the Americans also started what was called a Franklin book program. Under that, a lot of books were translated, but they were mainly textbooks. In the war of translations, in that Cold War, I think the Soviet Union won because most Bengali families bought the Russian fairy tales for their children. I'm so sorry that they are no longer available. They were lovely, colorful, inexpensive books. The role of the translator, I mean, Vice-Chancellor সাহেবকে জিজ্ঞেস করলাম, আপনার ট্রান্সলেটরের নাম মনে আছে? ওনার নাম মনে ছিল না। That is the case with many translations. But the role of the translator is changing. And one of the first institutions which started this was the organization called PEN. There was a conference organized by PEN America in 1970 where it brought out a Bill of Rights. It is there. And the Bill of Rights was talked about the importance of the translator and how the translator must be recognized as sovereign. The original Bill of Rights used the pronoun he. এখন কিন্তু আমরা শুধু he ব্যবহার করি না, because অনেক ট্রান্সলেটররা কিন্তু মহিলা আপাতত, আর ওরা প্রাইজও পাচ্ছে। So I changed the he to they and translator to they, and translator to translators. In 2020, there was another conference by PEN, and PEN realized that we cannot only talk about the importance of the translator, we must talk about the importance of other people as well. However, they began by saying that translation is a form of writing, a form of creative writing. And that translation must be sustainable. আমাদের এখানে এখনো প্রচলন আছে একজন রাইটার তার বন্ধু বা বান্ধবীকে একটা গল্প দিয়ে দেন, বলে এটা বাবা একটা অনুবাদ করে দে না, আমার ৮ ঘন্টা লাগবে, পয়সা ব্যাপার হয় না। But translation must be sustainable as a livelihood. But then what PEN talked about in 2020 was that translators have responsibilities. And what are these responsibilities? Responsibilities to the text. Because, again, I refer to the Vice-Chancellor, he talked about asparagus. Now, in those days, it was asparagus, yes. In those days, তখন East Pakistan ছিল না, বা বাংলাদেশ ছিল। You were born in Bangladesh. Yeah. East Pakistan তো asparagus ছিলই না, বাংলাদেশে একটা দুটা asparagus আসতো, because তখন বাঙালিরা বেশি বাইরে যেতে আরম্ভ করেছিল। You need to understand the context. So the translator has responsibilities, and the responsibilities are to the cultural, social, racial, political and linguistic context of the writing. যেমন উনি বললেন চামচার কথা, চামচা, আমরা সব চামচা জানি, তাই না? চামচা জানি না? হ্যাঁ, আমার চামচা নাই। চামচা সবাই জানে, we don't need to be translated. Apart from the translators, rights, this manifesto talks about the responsibility of authors. Authors must recognize their translators. must honor their translators, and if their work wins any award, they must share that award with their translators. It talks about the responsibility of publishers. What responsibility do publishers have? One of the very important things that this manifesto talks about is that little-known languages, writings from little-known languages, must be translated. But one of the important points that this manifesto makes is a point that Bangladeshi writers and translators would not agree with. And that is, and I quote, "We reject the old binary of original versus copy." আমরা যারা ইংরেজি অনুবাদ করি, আমাদেরকে যখন বলা হয় এটা ওই বাংলা বইয়ের অনুবাদ বা বাংলা কবিতার অনুবাদ, আমরা কি করি? আমরা সঙ্গে সঙ্গে ওই বাংলা অরিজিনালটা বের করি আর কম্পেয়ার করি আর বলি না এটা তো হয় নাই, এটা হয় নাই, এটা হয় নাই, এখানে ভুল। What this manifesto says is that translation has no connection with the original. There is no such thing as the original and the copy. Etate amra as writers and translators amra hoyto agree korbo na. Ami ekhane ekটু Dr. Razia Sultana ke quote korbo, who told aspiring translators, be respectful of the writer. You haven't created this piece. Try to be as close to the meaning of the text as possible. And I think that for Bangladeshi writers and translators, this point would remain. Even before the publication of the Pen Manifesto, an interesting novel upended the relationship between author, between author and translator. Bryce Matthewson's Revenge of the Translator, translated by Emma Ramadan in 2018. Matthewson is a French literary translator who has translated over 200 novels from English into French. I don't know how he has done it. At that time, AI was not available, so he must have got a lot of helpers to help him write these books. I don't know. In 2009, he published his first novel, Vengeance du Traducteur, Vengeance of the Translator. In the novel Trad, which is short for traductor, translator, but also means traitor, in the book Trad is translating the author's book from English to French. The book opens with footnotes from Trad as he justifies changes that he makes in the translation. As the novel progresses, Trad begins to take over the writing, with the footnotes becoming longer. Trad does not just translate, he intervenes and changes the text. The reality of the novel and fiction blur as Trad's world merges with the world of the novel. As if this was not enough, the translator herself becomes a character in the novel. We talked about recognizing the translator. And one way of recognizing the translator is by sharing awards. I think the first time we became conscious of this was when in 2022, when Gitanjali, this is page 13, when Gitanjali Shri, the writer of the Hindi novel Red Samadhi, shared the International Booker Prize with her translator Daisy Rockwell for her English translation Tomb of Sand. Both of them shared the award. They were both shown on publicity photos, and the name of the translator became as famous as the name of the writer. So those who read English books would be aware of Daisy Rockwell. This year, The International Booker, we gave, the Vice-Chancellor was talking about a person who did not win the International Booker Prize. This year, the International Booker Prize was won by Indian writer and lawyer Banu Mushtaq, who wrote in what was not her mother tongue, because she was brought up in Urdu, and she had to take Kannada because her father wanted to send her to a good school, and that school taught in Kannada. So she wrote in what was not her mother tongue. She was the first author to win writing in the Kannada language, first author for a short story anthology, and the translator, Deepa Bhashti, is the first Indian translator to win an international book. We know that the Nobel gives prizes to translated books. Famous is Rabindranath's Gitanjali. But the translator is not recognized. The International Booker changed its rules in 2016 and allowed for the first time translated books, books translated into English but published abroad. That's a very important thing to remember. The first year, 30 books in 34 languages were submitted. In 2024, the International Booker Prize, work submitted for the International Booker Prize had been translated into English from 74 languages. By recognizing translators indirectly, the International Booker Prize was also encouraging writers in different languages. The Commonwealth Short Story Prize also allows translated fiction. And in 2019, the first translated short story from Greek to English was awarded a prize. One of our writers, in 2018, the Bangladeshi writer Nahreen Khan, who teaches at Central Women's University, was shortlisted for his story Janatik Jadukar, which was translated into English by Orunava Sinha. Perhaps the most well-known translator, I'm going to share very quickly, is Robert Fitzgerald for his translation of the Riwayat of Umar Khayyam. Even though his translation has been criticized, he is still the most often, I think, he is still the most often quoted translator of Khayyam. There is a, when we read translations, we don't, get excited over it. But the English poet John Dryden, when he read John Chapman's translation of Homer, he got so excited that he wrote a sonnet and said that it looked as when I read the translation into English, it seemed as if I was seeing a new planet in the sky or a whole new world. Now, even though Keats referred to someone who today we dislike because he was a murderer, he was a rapist, he ravaged and destroyed a civilization. Nevertheless, the excitement of Keats' poem is manifest if you read the sonnet. Most translations have been done by other people. But there are also some very famous self-translators. Rabindranath Tagore, Ruqayya Sakawat Hussain, Sayyid Waliullah, Samuel Beckett, who wrote first in French and then translated his play into English. And in our country there's Sayyid Manzoor Islam. He's a brilliant writer. If you haven't read his short stories, they are available. He writes in Bangla, but they're also available in English translation. Other people have translated Manzoor's stories, but he likes to translate his stories himself. One of the most famous self-translators was perhaps Rabindranath Tagore. And what he did was, he didn't set out to translate Gitanjali. He fell in, and to while away his time, he translated Gitanjali, but Gitanjali was his. So what did he do? He took 50 poems, songs from the Bangla Gitanjali, 53 from the Bangla Gitanjali, and 50 from his other collections, and translated them and created the English Gitanjali, which won him the Nobel Prize. Now many people, Tagore himself has remarked that he is not good in English, but that is not true. And I think that his prose translation of Where the Mind is Without Fear is one of the great prose poems of the world. He did not rhyme, wonderful. He did use cadence, rhythmic lines, and he also used some alliteration. Rabindranath's Gitanjali won the Nobel Prize, but it also appealed to an English poet, Wilfred Owen, who was skilled in the war. Before he left for France, Wilfred said goodbye to his mother, and he murmured some words to her. When her son was killed and his diary was returned to her, she saw the line written there and Rabindranath's name under it. And then she wrote to him to thank him for giving this consolation to her son. I have given the poem here if anyone wants to read it, the whole poem. Rabindranath's prose was also being translated, not for the Western audience, his short stories. Short stories were being translated so that Bengali boys, Bengali students could understand the English better because they could understand the context. There is no mention of the editor in this book, Stories from Tagore, no mention of the translators. I'm jumping, we have moved on from Bengal to Afghanistan, from Bangla to Urdu. Translations reach across cultures, bottom of page 19 if you are interested, and make available stories that would otherwise not be available to those who cannot read the original. In his telegram to the Swedish Academy, which was read out by the British Arts Affairs at the Global Banquet on December 10, 1913, Rabindranath expressed his gratitude for the recognition. I beg to convey to the Swedish Academy my grateful appreciation of the breadth of understanding which has brought the distant near and has made a stranger a brother. He was not talking about translation, but it was translation that enabled him to get the Nobel. Though Tagore's poetry did not have an impact on Wilfred Owen's poetry, through translation, his story Kabuliwala did have an impact on a Pakistani Urdu writer, Zahida Hela. In her story, translated as Kumkum is fine in English, the granddaughter of Tagore's story has become a grandmother, and the granddaughter has become a doctor and is serving in Afghanistan. One night, a young Afghan comes to her, and Kumkum, that is her name, is terrified of the Afghan because we have heard stories about Kabuliwalas, about Afghans, about the Taliban. But then she remembers that she is a doctor, and as a doctor she is meant to treat this man no matter which side he is on. And after she treats him, this wounded Afghan leaves, giving her a handful of dried fruit, just cater to his or her foreign reader. Should Salman Rushdie have translated Chamcha? Now, those of you who have read Salman Rushdie know that Salman Rushdie did not translate the Urdu. Oh, he did translate the Urdu, but he translated it not to make it easier for the foreign reader to understand, but because that is the way Indians speak. They speak nowadays, Bengalis are also speaking in the same way. Now, should the translator translate words that might not be familiar to the foreign reader? You might have seen many translations where the word gamcha is replaced as rough towel or coarse towel. There's no need to replace gamcha. Let the foreign reader understand that there is this very particular thing called gamcha, which is part of a culture. আমি এখানে তিনটা গল্প দিয়েছি, they all written না, এটা দরকার নেই, গামছা দরকার, এই যে গামছা, okay? We all must respect the gamcha, very important. Maybe Kessler will write a poem about the gamcha next. Siddharth Hussain Manto wrote some wonderful stories, some not wonderful, some very powerful stories about the partition. Some of them were short stories, but little long. Some of them are very, very short. And I have given you 3 very short stories about a train massacre, translated by 3 different Indians who were good in Urdu. The story is the same. A train is running, the train is stopped, some people get onto the train, they find out who people of a different religion are, they kill them, and then they give the survivors who belong to their religion some food. So one translator names the food milk, custard pies, and fresh fruit. Then he assumed, do you know what a custard pie is? Custard pie? I don't know what a custard pie is. But the translator assumed that the English reader would not know halwa. So he used the translation custard pie. But those of you who play Scrabble know that today halwa has become a Scrabble word. Another translator kept halwa, he kept fruits, he kept milk, and he kept halwa. Same story. The third story keeps halwa, adds one phrase. And the phrase that this translator adds is bhaiyo or ben, addressing the audience. What has this translator done without telling us that he is doing it? Anyone from the audience? আমি আপনাদেরকে ভাইও আর বেহনো বলে অ্যাড্রেস করতাম, ভাইও or behno. Where would you address people as bhaiyo or behno? In an Urdu-speaking country, just instead of saying ladies and gentlemen, he retains bhaiyo or behno and tells us that this train massacre took place in North India, which is what it did. And there are many, many stories of train massacres. I know I'm running over time. 10 minutes. Yes. Okay, now I move to the translation situation in Bangladesh. I'm going to finish it very quickly. In 2003, opening the Boimela, the Prime Minister talked about translating Bangla into foreign languages. Now, the work of the Bangla Academy till then had been to translate foreign languages into Bangla. But the Prime Minister talking about it was interesting. Translation was being done. A lot of translation of reports, documents was being done. But literary translation, it was sporadic. And one important point was made by the poet Al-Mahmood at a PEN Bangladesh conference, that don't bother translating, Bengalis should not bother translating Bangla books. No matter how many books you translate, those books are not going to be recognized. Unless a foreigner whose mother tongue, unless a foreigner translates a Bangla book into his or her mother tongue, that book will not get the recognition or the status it deserves. How true is this? Some of us think that Indian translators are better than Bangladeshi translators. But I would like to tell you a little anecdote where Shabnam Nadia, Kalash was translated was being published by Zuban, but the writer, Shaheen Akbar, refused to have it published as it was. She said, no, I want Shabnam Nadia to edit it. I don't like this. I don't like the language of this book. So please remember the name of Shabnam Nadia. She is one of our great translators. Bangladeshi translators have been published abroad, but so far they have not got the recognition. Bangladeshi writers, when they write in English and are published abroad, have got recognition and have won awards. Most translations by Bangladeshi translators have been published within Bangladesh by Bangladeshi institutions or publishers who do not have foreign affiliations. As a result, these translations are not available to the foreign reader. I give a list of the institutions and the publishers which have engaged in literary translation. First and foremost is the Bangla Academy. Then we have the Kobi Nazrul Institute. But the Kobi Nazrul Institute, I think, publishes whatever it gets. Publishers are important. The University Press has published a lot of literary translation. Ninfia Publication is a new publishing house, but they have also published, they publish coffee table books, books on culture of Bangladesh, but they have also published some literary translations. Writers Inc., that is my press. ULab Press, it underwent some changes of name. The University Press of the University of the Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. Not only does it publish literary translations, but it also, ULab, not only does it have a press to publish literary translations, but it has also held workshops on translation to improve the quality of translation. I think I am going to jump. 5 minutes? Okay. So all languages are untranslatable. Nabokov, do you read Nabokov? Have you read Nabokov? Are we allowed to say that we read Nabokov? I don't know, anyway. Okay. Nabokov, apart from having written Lolita, which is a masterpiece, was a linguist. He was trilingual. And he found translation difficult. He said, what is translation? On a platter, a poet's spearhead, a parrot's screech, a monkey's chatter, and profanation of the dead. George Steiner says it much more prosaically. He says, even the most simplest words are sometimes impossible to translate. How do you translate chamcha? I don't know. How do you translate Obhiman? Chamcha might be translatable. How do you translate Obhiman? Now, does a translator, now a poet, Omyo Chakrabarti, at the same conference in 1970, said only poets can translate poetry. Only a translator who has learned the language at his mother's knee can translate. How true is that? A little while ago, again I refer to the Vice-Chancellor, the Vice-Chancellor told us about a person who had grown up with Urdu, and because he was so interested in Rabindranath that he learned Bangla. I had heard a romantic story that he was so in love with his wife that he learned Bangla to be able to speak to him. I don't know which is true. Anyway, so Abu Sayyid Ayyub, so Joseph Conrad was not brought up in English. He is one of the masters of the English language. So, we can question this. But what is important is that if a Bangladeshi wants to translate, the Bangladeshi has to be very, very, very good in what translators call the target language. Sometimes, I would say, it is more important to be better in the language into which you are translating than the language from which you are translating. And I would like to give the example, because they are available right in front of me, of Dr. Razia Sultana Khan and Noura Shamsi Bahar. Noura Shamsi Bahar didn't know Bangla. Razia Sultana Khan said, giving away secrets, she says it's easier to translate than to write a creative piece of writing. In India, English has become the language of creativity, but even in India, translation plays a very important role. This year, we saw Bani Mushtaq getting the International Booker because her book had been translated from Kannada to English. In Bangladesh, where some of the best writers write in Bangla, and I would like to give you a young man's name, Muzaffar Hussain. If you haven't read him, please read him. And there are many other Bengali writers who are writing, and the way they write is very different from the way that Bangladeshis writing in English write. Please read the Bangla writers if you can. The role of the translator will grow in Bangladesh. There will be increasing need for good translators with a good command of Bangla, preferably a better command of the target language. If you're translating into French, French, if you're translating into English, English. With an awareness of cultures and with the ability to translate creatively and sensitively from Bangla into another language. The Gitanjali poem which I quoted, an excerpt of which I quoted at the beginning, is not about translators. it is actually about art. But it is truly applicable to them. It is the translator who bridges the gap between languages, makes friendship possible between people who speak different languages, and familiarizes what is unfamiliar. It is only fitting that the importance of translators is being recognized and that they are being honored. Without them, most readers would be deprived of the wealth of literature in the many languages of the world. Thank you.